Something serious is moving in Los Angeles right now. And this is not empty off-season noise. What looks like an offensive line adjustment could turn into the decision that defines whether Justin Herbert finally gets to breathe in the pocket or keep surviving chaos. And the wildest part? One move that feels safe on the surface could push this roster into a massive risk somewhere else. So, let me ask Bolt fam right out of the gate. Do you trust this front office is building a truly aggressive plan? Hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what move you would make today before this market completely blows up. Herbert did not need another promise. He needed somebody to take control of the heart of that offensive line. And it looks like the Chargers understood that before the market turned into a full-on bidding war. Bringing in Tyler Biadasz on a 3-year, $30 million deal changes the tone of this offseason because it fills a major hole at center, right after Bradley Bozeman's retirement. And no, that is not some tiny detail. When a team acts before free agency really catches fire, it is telling the locker room and the fan base that it does not want to be held hostage by panic, desperation, or last-second patchwork moves. The impact here hits the entire offense. A veteran center with Pro Bowl pedigree helps with line calls, handles pressure better, and gives Justin Herbert more stability when the pocket starts getting muddy inside. That matters a lot. And there is another key point here too. If the Chargers really checked Biadasz's knee and ankle before locking this in, then they clearly believe the injury risk is manageable. That means this was not some blind gamble. But here is where the debate starts heating up for Bolt fam. Is it smarter to pay for stability right now? Or should the Chargers have pushed all the way in for a bigger name like Tyler Linderbaum? Because that is part of the message too. Los Angeles, from everything we can see, was not willing to jump into a $20+ million per year fight. They chose a more controlled financial route. And I want to hear you on this one. Would you rather spend huge for the elite name, or take the strong option that leaves you more room to build the rest of the line? There are two very clear paths from here. In the first one, Biadasz stays healthy, brings leadership, gives the line consistency, and the Chargers use the extra money they saved to attack the guard spots and finally turn the entire unit into something real. That is the version where the front office looks sharp, cold-blooded, and one step ahead of everybody else. In the other path, Biadasz ends up underperforming or the injuries creep back in, while another center signs elsewhere and becomes the gold standard. And then the story flips fast, because today's smart savings become tomorrow's regret. Either way, one thing is obvious. The Chargers were not going to sit back and let that problem grow. They made a choice, and choices like this always come with consequences. But what makes this even more interesting is that this decision might have opened the door to something even bigger. Something that would not just affect the offensive line, something that could completely change the ceiling of this offense. Sometimes an offseason looks calm only on the surface. You glance at it and think the Chargers' plan is simple. Fix the line, make life easier for Herbert, patch a few spots, and keep it moving. But underneath that is where things get dangerous. Because the second the word gets out that Los Angeles has been keeping tabs on A.J. Brown, the conversation stops being about maintenance and starts being about real ambition. For most of this early stretch, the tone around the Chargers has been pretty clear. Be smart. Be disciplined. Do not throw crazy money around. Do not dive headfirst into every superstar chase. And honestly, that approach made sense. The Biadasz deal only reinforced the image of a front office that wants to fix serious issues without losing control of the cap. But football is not always about balance. Sometimes it is about recognizing the exact moment when playing it safe stops helping you, and taking a huge swing becomes the only thing that can change your future. That is why the A.J. Brown possibility hits so hard. Reports say the Chargers have been monitoring the situation, and the starting price would be at least a first-round pick. In one projected package, Los Angeles would get Brown while Philadelphia would get the Chargers' 2026 first-rounder and Quentin Johnston. Now let's be clear, because this matters. There are real financial complications on the Eagles' side, especially if a trade happened before June. So this needs to be treated like a rumor with serious obstacles, not a deal that is already halfway done. But the fact that this kind of smoke even exists, that changes the whole vibe. The impact would be massive. You would be adding a true alpha receiver, a physical monster, a game breaker with 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and pairing him with Ladd McConkey. That changes spacing. That changes coverage. That changes how defenses line up before the snap. Herbert would suddenly have a target who can bully defenders, win through contact, and completely tilt the field. So let me throw the vote at you right now. Is A.J. Brown worth that package or not? Because this is where the fight splits the fan base. On one side, you can argue that true stars almost never become available. And when they do, a team with a franchise quarterback has to go for the throat. On the other side, giving up a premium pick and Quentin Johnston for a big money contract could squeeze the rest of the roster, especially for a team that still needs to shore up the offensive line and keep some balance across the depth chart. The two possible outcomes look very different. If the Chargers pull the trigger and the deal lands, the offense jumps into another tier overnight, and Bolt fans starts talking about a unit that can light up the scoreboard in a completely different way. But if they back off, they keep the draft capital, keep the flexibility, and avoid overcommitting. The risk there? They may still end up without that true wide receiver one who changes everything when the game gets tight. And when a window like this opens, playing it safe can cost you just as much as going all in. And that is why this next part matters even more than people realize. Because as big as the Biadasz move is, and as flashy as the A.J. Brown rumor sounds, the real pressure point might still be sitting right there on the interior offensive line, not at center anymore. Everybody sees the Tyler Biadasz signing and thinks one word right away: security. And that is fair. But the truth might be the exact opposite of what it looks like at first. The Chargers did not just make a move to stabilize center. They bought themselves room to make a much tougher decision at guard. And that is where this whole thing gets split right down the middle. Because this signing did not simply solve the offensive line. It basically shoved the team straight toward the Zion Johnson question. Once Biadasz signs for 3 years and $30 million, Los Angeles avoids getting dragged into what could have been a completely outrageous bidding war for Tyler Linderbaum, who might command more than $20 million a year. That changes the math immediately. Instead of pouring a giant chunk of money into one player, the Chargers preserve flexibility and give themselves a better shot at filling other holes without panic. On paper, that sounds like exactly the kind of disciplined team building everybody claims to want. But in reality, that savings creates pressure. Because now, the Chargers have a real path to bring Zion Johnson back, and that is not nearly as simple as it sounds. Here's the contradiction. A lot of people will say re-signing Zion is obvious, because trying to fill 3 offensive line spots in one offseason is asking for trouble. And yes, there is logic there. After a strong 2025 season on a bad overall line, he built some market value. But the projected number changes everything. If his market really pushes past $20 million a year with the level of interest he is getting, then the Chargers would be making a huge bet on a guard who was not exactly dominant across the board. So let me ask it plainly. Does that excite you, or does that worry you? Because the impact of this choice goes way beyond one player. If Zion comes back on a big contract, the franchise is telling you it values continuity and believes familiar protection around Herbert is the safest route forward. That could help the offensive line build chemistry and identity. But the conflict is obvious. Are you really ready to pay elite money for a player who still sparks debate about what his true ceiling actually is? Do you pay for stability? Or do you refuse to overvalue a guy just because the need is there? Again, there are 2 paths. If the Chargers bring Zion back, and he takes another leap with Biadasz beside him, then the line could go from chronic weakness to legitimate foundation. But if the contract gets huge and the performance stays merely decent, Los Angeles could lock a massive chunk of cap space into a spot where the value never fully matches the price. And just when it feels like all the pressure is on the offense, another need shows up on the other side of the ball that could scramble the entire priority list all over again. And this is where things get really interesting, because if this next move actually happens, a lot of people are not going to understand how big it is until the defense already looks different on Sundays. Draymond Jones is not the kind of name that instantly explodes across every headline for the casual fan, but he is exactly the type of player who can change the texture of a defensive front when he lands in the right system. And when you look at what the Chargers still need in terms of pass rush and frontline rotation, it becomes very easy to see why this fit makes real sense. Jones is coming off a productive season. 43 tackles, 7 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 2 fumble recoveries, and a pass defended. At 29 years old, he is not being talked about as some developmental prospect. He is a versatile defender in his prime, strong enough to hold up against physical play, and quick enough to attack different angles. At 6'3" and 281 pounds, he brings the kind of blend defensive coaches love: power at the point of attack and enough burst to wreck the pocket. And the key detail here is that both the Titans and Ravens viewed him as an edge presence at different times. That matters because it lines up directly with something the Chargers still need. The impact would not just show up in sack totals. This kind of player helps the constant pressure, pocket collapse, alignment flexibility, and rotational strength. In plain English, Draymond Jones would not have to be the face of the defense to make the defense better. He could be the type of addition that lets the entire unit breathe easier, keeps the front fresh, and maintains aggression deep into games when the season starts grinding people down. So here is the priority question for Bolt fam. What is the bigger urgency right now? Continuing to stack help around Herbert, or strengthening the defensive front with a move like this? That is the real conflict. On one side, you can say everything starts with protecting Herbert and finally unleashing this offense. On the other, there is a strong argument that the Chargers cannot win just by scoring more. They have to close games, win on third down, and affect quarterbacks when the biggest moments hit. And Jones fits right into that middle ground. He would not be a glamour signing. He would be a structural signing. The kind that might not dominate sports talk for 48 hours, but could matter in December and January more than people think. And yes, there are 2 paths here too. If Los Angeles makes the move and Jones fits the way you hope, the defense gains depth, versatility, and more answers against physical offenses and mobile quarterbacks. But if the Chargers pass on that kind of opportunity because they are too focused on loading up only one side of the ball, they could end up building an offense with fireworks and a defense that caves in when the schedule gets ugly. That is what makes this offseason feel so razor thin. Every move strengthens one area, but every move can also leave another area screaming for help. And that brings us right back to the bigger picture. This is not just about one center, one roomer, one guard contract, or one defensive lineman. It is about identity. Tyler Biadasz brought immediate stability. The A.J. Brown rumor pushed the ceiling of this offense way up. The Zion Johnson situation exposed the real cost of continuity. And Draymond Jones represents the kind of under-the-radar reinforcement that could toughen up the defense without stealing all the headlines. That was the promise from the start. The Chargers' offseason is not being defined by one isolated move. It is being shaped by a chain reaction of decisions that tells you exactly what kind of team this front office wants to build. So now I am throwing it to you one last time. Would you go all in on the offense, or would you lock down the foundation of the roster first? Drop your take in the comments, hit like, subscribe, and send this to another Chargers fan who needs to decide where this team should push its chips next.